Buongiorno a tutti e benvenuti a questa 2 giorni impegnativa e speriamo densa di idee nuove, contributi, riflessioni, scambi. Questo è il convegno internazionale con cui si chiude il percorso annuale di ricerca in filosofia della religione, portato avanti da 3 ricercatori, 3 tutor e un coordinatore. Ci sono stati degli appuntamenti seminariali a cadenza, diciamo, bimestrale più o meno, e con questo convegno ecco che chiudiamo la ricerca annuale per poi riprendere dall'anno prossimo con modalità che sicuramente vi comunicheremo al più presto, soprattutto se volete lasciare il vostro indirizzo e siete interessati giù di sotto nella mailing list, per cui sarete aggiornati su tutti gli eventi filosofici e non della fondazione. Io ringrazio voi per essere presenti, ringrazio i 3 ricercatori di quest'anno che sono Sergio Berardini, Sofia Vescovelli e Fabrizio Renzi. Ringrazio i tutor che sono Daniele Bertini, Elisa Crimi e Stefano Santasilia. Ringrazio la dottoressa Palvarini e Massimo Schiavi e Davide Assal della Fondazione Campostrini che sostiene e promuove la ricerca filosofica e filosofico-religiosa in Italia, soprattutto se portata avanti da giovani ricercatori. Ringrazio tutte le sorelle dell'Istituto Campostrini che si prodigano dedicando tempo, energia e anche con molta pazienza ad accoglierci e ad accogliere i relatori, a organizzare tutti gli spostamenti e a provvedere a che gli spazi siano adeguati, puliti, adatti ad una occasione del genere. Ringrazio tutti i tecnici che collaborano con la Fondazione Campostrini ed è anche grazie al loro lavoro se tutto per adesso ha funzionato senza nessun problema e sicuramente anche in questi 2 giorni sarà così. E ringrazio poi i relatori che vi presenterò via via. Vi ricordo che stamani c'è la prima relazione del convegno, l'abbiamo pensata così: ogni ogni ricercatore che quest'anno ha portato avanti la propria ricerca annuale su un tema specifico ha individuato uno specialista a livello internazionale su questo tema, lo ha invitato al convegno chiedendogli di preparare una relazione e di inviare a lui stesso, in questo caso a Sofia Vescovelli, almeno un abstract del suo intervento. Quindi adesso sentiremo il professor Nagasawa che è l'invitato di Sofia Vescovelli e poi la ricercatrice della fondazione, sulla base del percorso annuale su quello stesso tema, reagirà alla relazione del professore. Solitamente c'è anche il tutor che fa da ulteriore respondent, però purtroppo il tutor di Sofia Vescovelli, che è Daniele Bertini, non può essere presente per problemi lavorativi, per cui starà soltanto Sofia, quindi possiamo anche prenderci un attimo più di tempo, anche perché il professor Nagasawa parlerà in inglese, vi abbiamo fornito traduzione italiana, Sofia parlerà in inglese, ma poi ci sarà uno spazio di discussione aperta al pubblico, potete fare delle domande anche in italiano e Sofia provvederà a tradurle al professor Nagasawa, però questo richiederà un po' più di tempo. Vi chiediamo anzi, se avete delle domande lunghe, ogni tanto di fermarvi per far sì che Sofia possa tradurre bene senza perdere niente al professore e poi continuare la domanda e quando il professore risponderà ugualmente poi Sofia vi tradurrà la risposta in italiano. Viceversa, se la domanda sarà in inglese, comunque sia, per chi non lo comprende, Sofia tradurrà in italiano, per cui ti tocca fare da una parte e dall'altra. Quindi questa è la prima relazione di questa mattina. Oggi pomeriggio ci sarà invece una tavola rotonda organizzata in collaborazione con l'Associazione Italiana di Filosofia della Religione. Poi domani mattina seguiranno altre 2 relazioni del convegno, la prima con Massimo Donà, che è stato invitato da Sergio Berardini, e quindi reagiranno a Massimo Donà, Sergio Berardini e Stefano Santasilia, e poi infine il professor Javier Maria Prades Lopez, che è stato invitato da Fabrizio Renzi, e quindi reagiranno alla sua relazione sia Fabrizio Renzi che Elisa Grimi. Penso non ci sia altro da dire se non presentare più nel dettaglio il professor Nagasawa, che è professore di filosofia e co-direttore del John Hicks Center for Philosophy of Religion all'Università di Birmingham, nel Regno Unito. Nagasawa ha lavorato a lungo sul problema del male e sulla questione dell'esistenza di Dio. Ricordiamo fra le sue opere principali Alternative Concepts of God e Scientific Approaches to the Philosophy of Religion. E la sua relazione si concentrerà proprio su questo tema, cioè sulla questione del male nell'ateismo, cioè come il pensiero non religioso affronta il male, perché certamente il problema del male della teodicea è un problema centrale della riflessione teologica, ma la questione centrale è al di là dell'orizzonte teologico. Il male cessa di essere un problema per l'ateismo. Ecco, il professor Nagasawa approfondirà questa questione e appunto sarà seguita dall'intervento di Sofia Vescovelli. Provo a fare una presentazione anche in inglese che mi sembra più carino. Professor Nagasawa is professor of philosophy and co-director of the John Hicks Center for Philosophy of Religion at the University of Birmingham in the UK. He worked along on the question of evil and on the question of existence of God, and among his principal books we can recall Alternative Concepts of God and Scientific Approaches to the Philosophy of Religion. His talk will be focused on the problem of evil in the atheism, and it will be followed by the dialogical talk or critical response by Sofia Vescovelli. Grazie a tutti e buon convegno.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming, and also thank you for inviting me to this wonderful conference. The weather is amazing, and the town is beautiful, and the food was just fantastic in this country. And it's so nice to be here, and I'm very grateful to the organizers of this conference, and especially Sofia for her hospitality and also translating my paper from English to Italian. I'm sorry that I have to give this talk in English. Unfortunately, I don't speak Italian, but I will try to speak slowly. And if anything is unclear, please let me know in the question time. So the topic of this paper is the problem of evil. The problem of evil is concerned with the existence of God and its compatibility with the existence of evil in this world. So how come there are wars and murders and a lot of horrible events in this world if God created this world? So God is meant to be all-loving, all-powerful, and all-knowing. So how could there be evil in this world? Now, arguably, this is the greatest challenge for atheists. So many people think that this is the best argument against theism. And there have been a lot of books and papers written on this topic. So according to a certain researcher, more than 3,600 articles and books have been written on the problem of evil since 1960 alone. And this data are a little bit old, about 15 years old. So I'm sure that there have been even more papers since then. Now, there are a lot of different versions of the problem of evil. So, for example, there is the logical problem of evil, which says that the existence of God is logically incompatible with the existence of evil. So it's just a matter of logical inconsistency. is the question. So the existence of God is logically inconsistent with the existence of evil. There is also the evidential problem of evil, which is slightly more modest than the logical problem. So this problem says that the existence of evil is not necessarily logically inconsistent with the existence of God, but nevertheless, it is good evidence against the existence of God. And also there is the problem of horrendous evil, which is introduced by Marilyn Adams. And Adams focuses on intense pain and suffering of specific individuals. So sometimes when people go through intense, really horrific pain and suffering, you might wonder whether these people's lives are worth living. So you might think that actually they're so intense and so bad that it might not be worth living this kind of life. And that kind of personal, emotional problem is arguably good evidence against the existence of God. There is also the problem of natural evil. So philosophers tend to focus on the problem of moral evil. So they tend to focus on wars and murders and all sorts of crimes that are committed by people who are moral agents. But actually, there is natural evil as well. So if you look at nature, there are a lot of horrible natural disasters that could kill a lot of people. And you might wonder, how could there be God if there are so many horrible natural disasters in this world? But anyway, there are a lot of different versions of the problem of evil, and they are all targeted against theists, because they are arguments against theism. And also there are a lot of theistic responses to the problem of evil. So some theists appeal to free will, so they say that because God had to create free humans, and humans sometimes do morally wrong things, even though they sometimes do morally good things as well. But because of the consequence of their free will, there is evil in this world. And some other people appeal to soul making. So John Hick says that evil is necessary for our spiritual growth. So evil is not necessarily a positive thing. It's not a positive thing all the time, but nevertheless, in order for us to mature our souls, we have to experience evil. Skeptical theists claim that because our knowledge is so limited compared with God's knowledge of morality and the world and so on, that we just cannot comprehend why there has to be evil. But actually, there must be a reason why God has to allow evil. But we just cannot see it because our knowledge is so limited. Anyway, there are a lot of responses to the problem of evil as well. So they try to show that the existence of God and the existence of evil are compatible. Now, in this paper, I want to introduce a new form of the problem of evil, which I call the problem of systemic evil. And this problem focuses on natural selection. So it is a version of the problem of natural evil. Now, nature is governed by natural selection, which involves competition for survival. So according to the theory of evolution, nature is governed by random mutation and natural selection. But natural selection involves pain and suffering of billions of animals over many, many years. And uncountably many organisms have competed and struggled for survival. And in this cruel blind system, the weaker are eliminated, and even the survivors will eventually die, often painfully and miserably. And Charles Darwin was quite puzzled by this problem. So he wondered why there has to be natural selection, which is such a horrible thing to have. And he introduces several specific examples of natural evil caused by natural selection. And here is his example on the slide. So there are certain parasitic wasps that deposit eggs in caterpillars while the caterpillars are still alive. So they put eggs in the bodies of the caterpillars. And then these hatchlings, the babies of the wasps, when they hatch, they eat the live bodies of the caterpillars. And it looks like a really horrible thing for the caterpillars. And Darwin was quite puzzled by the existence of these insects. And here is a quote from Darwin. With respect to the theological view of the question, this is always painful to me. I am bewildered. I had no intention to write atheistically, but I own that I cannot see as plainly as others do, and as I should wish to do, evidence of design and beneficence on all sides of us. There seems to be too much misery in the world. I cannot persuade myself that the beneficent and omnipotent God would have designatedly created the parasitic wasps with the express intention of their feeding within the living bodies of caterpillars, or that a cat should play with mice. So he was simply puzzled how an all-powerful, all-loving God create these insects. And he also said about his book, what a book devil's chaplain might write on the clumsy, wasteful, blundering law and horribly cruel works of nature. And it seems to me that nature is like a small cage in which many animals are placed together so that they desperately fight and kill each other for limited resources until a handful survive. So nature is as if this little cage where you put a lot of animals like cats and dogs and mice and insects and so on, and only a small amount of food and small amount of other resources. And basically you let them fight each other until some of them survive. So it's really a horrible thing to have, it seems to me. And Darwin wrote his book on the theory of evolution because he was influenced by Thomas Malthus's book on human population. So in that book, Malthus says that human population doesn't grow exponentially because we have limited resources, natural resources. So when there are too many people, then people start, try to survive within the limited natural resources. So there is an inevitable competition of people. So weaker people actually die out. So that's why the human population doesn't grow after a certain point, given the limited natural resources. And Darwin derived the idea of evolution from Malthus's work. So here are some further comments on this problem by philosophers. So Holmes Rollston III says, though there is no sin in amoral nature, there is quite a list of candidate evils from which nature might need to be redeemed. Predation, parasitism, selfishness, randomness, blindness, disaster, indifference, waste, struggle, suffering, death. So there are a lot of really, really horrible things that we wouldn't want to have in nature. Here's Richard Dawkins. Dawkins is, as you might know, an atheist scientist. And he says, natural selection is out there, and it is a very unpleasant process. Nature is red in tooth and claw. But I don't want to live in that kind of world. I want to change the world in which I live in such a way that natural selection no longer applies. So I think his claim that he wouldn't want to live in a world where natural selection is true is really illuminating, because we can imagine a political system that is based on natural selection, and that would be a horrible society. You know, if you are sick or if you are handicapped, then you cannot survive, and only selfish people who are physically strong can survive, because only they can acquire food and other natural resources. But that kind of society is really horrible, and no one wouldn't want to live in that kind of society. But actually, nature seems to be like that. So it's quite analogous to this kind of horrible society. And you might think that actually, even if that's true, at least our lives are not that bad. We don't need to constantly kill each other to survive in our modern society. But even if we are free from a cruel survival game of beasts, billions of other sentient animals have to live and will live in such conditions, and our human existence depends on it. So even if humans are free from this kind of survival game, there are billions of animals that have to go through these horrible pain and suffering because of natural selection. And also our existence depends on their pain and suffering. So we simply cannot ignore this kind of problem. And moreover, from a large historical point of view, humans are products of a long evolutionary process. And there are a lot of philosophers who discuss the problem of animal pain. So how could there be animal pain given the existence of God? So Quentin Smith, Paul Draper, Trent Doherty, Michael Murray, Christopher Southgate, and so on, they have addressed the problem of animal pain. But what I'm suggesting here is slightly different from their main focus, because I'm interested in the problem of systemic evil in nature. So I'm focusing on the system of natural selection rather than specific instances of pain and suffering. So the problem of evil standardly focuses on specific events that are considered evil, such as the Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide, the Boxing Day tsunami in Southeast Asia, and so on, or specific types of events, like wars, murders, rapes, earthquakes, floods, animal pain and suffering, and so on. But what I'm interested in here is the whole system of natural selection. The problem of systemic evil focuses on the entire biological system on which nature is based. And this problem seems to me to be more forceful and fundamental than other forms of the problem of evil. Okay, let us set aside the problem of systemic evil for the moment, and let's talk about something else, which is existential optimism. Existential optimism is the claim that the world is overall a good place and that we should be grateful for our existence in it. So the idea is that, there are some bad things in this world, but overall the world is great and we should be grateful and thankful to be alive in this good world. Nearly all theists agree that overall this is a good world. Leibniz said that this is the very best possible world because this world was created by the very best possible being, namely God. Many people reject Leibniz's claim. Many people think that this world is not completely perfect, but nevertheless, most people, especially most theists, think that this world is a very good world, even though it might not be perfect. So here are some theistic philosophers' claims about existential optimism. So they all affirm existential optimism. So Tom Morris says that we have a duty to worship God and be thankful for his benefits. So God created this world and our existence as well, so we should be grateful for his benefits. Robert Adams says, people who worship God do not normally praise him for his moral rectitude and good judgment in creating us. They thank God for their existence as for an undeserved personal favor. And Swinburne also says, worship is obligatory. It is the proper response of respect by man to his creator. So these theistic philosophers, they all agree that we should be thankful to God and we should worship God because God created this world and us as well. And we should be happy to be alive and we should be grateful to God. Now, what do atheists say about existential optimism? So there's a caricatured view of atheists. So people tend to think that atheists are very pessimistic, nihilistic, negative people who are not necessarily happy about their own existence. So for example, David Benatar, he's an atheist and nihilist, and he says that our existence is bad, and he says that it's always bad to be alive. So here's a quote from Benatar's book. He says, although the good things in one's life make it go better than it otherwise would have gone, one could not have been deprived by their absence if one had not existed. Those who never exist cannot be deprived. However, by coming into existence, one does suffer quite serious harms that could not have befallen one had one not come into existence. So he thinks that existence is always a bad thing, and it's better not to exist. But he's an extreme form of nihilist, and actually most atheists reject this kind of nihilism. And in fact, many of them affirm existential optimism. So many, if not most, atheists think that we have good reason to think that the world is generally good and that we should be happy and grateful that we live in it. So here are some quotes. So again, this is Richard Dawkins, who is quite a passionate atheist, but he affirms existential optimism. So here's a quote from his book. When I lie on my back and look up at the Milky Way, or when I look at the Grand Canyon, I'm overwhelmingly filled with a sense of almost worship. It's a feeling of sort of an abstract gratitude that I'm alive to appreciate these wonders. When I look down a microscope, it's the same feeling. I'm grateful to be alive to appreciate these wonders. And actually, this is not a quote from his book, but from one of his lectures. So he expresses existential optimism, even though he's an atheist. He also says, we have cause to give thanks for our highly improbable existence and the law-like evolutionary processes that gave rise to it. Such gratitude is not owed to or to be directed towards anything, anyone or anything. So he doesn't think that there is God, so he says that his gratitude is quite abstract. He's not directing his gratitude to someone or to something. But nevertheless, he says that we should be thankful to be alive and thankful to be able to appreciate the beauty of nature, especially given that our existence is highly improbable. Here's another atheist, Greta Christina, who says, I have a strong awareness of having good things in my life that I didn't earn, including, most importantly, my very existence. And it feels wrong to not express this awareness in some way. I don't like treating my good fortune as if it is just my due. I think gratitude is a good thing. So again, even though she endorses atheism, she says that we should be grateful for our existence. And actually, it's wrong not to express this kind of gratitude. Now, let's go back to the existential problem, the problem of systemic evil, and let's combine it with existential optimism. So now I want to develop what I call the existential problem of systemic evil. And I claim that this problem applies to both theists and atheists. So the problem of systemic evil for theists was this. So it raises the following question. Why does God create such a violent, cruel, and unfair biological system if his nature is such that he is powerful enough and benevolent enough to avoid it? And now we modify this problem slightly so that it applies to both theists and atheists. So here's what I call the existential problem of systemic evil. Why should we think that the world is overall good and that we should be happy and grateful to be alive in it if our existence depends fundamentally on a violent, cruel, and unfair biological system which guarantees pain and suffering of uncountably many sentient animals? So both theists and at least many atheists agree that we should be grateful for our existence and we should be happy to be alive and the world is overall great. But how can we say that if our existence depends on this system, the biological system, which seems to be evil? The existential problem does not mention God. It is based on the conflict between systemic evil and existential optimism. That's why it applies to both atheists and theists. The existential problem raises a challenge not only for theists, but also for atheists, as I said, who hold existential optimism. So as long as atheists affirm existential optimism, this problem applies. The core of the existential problem is the conflict between the scientific fact that our existence depends fundamentally on a violent, cruel, and unfair biological system which guarantees pain and suffering for many people and many other sentient animals. And also existential optimism, according to which the world is overall a good place and we should be grateful for our existence in it. Now, there is a philosophical paradox called the apology paradox, which was introduced by Jana Thompson. And you might think that this paradox is very similar to what I call the existential problem of systemic evil. So let's compare this paradox with the existential problem. So here is the paradox. So there are a lot of historical injustices, especially global historical injustices. So for example, World War II or the Holocaust or slavery and so on. So they are horrible historical events. Suppose that your existence depends on these historical events. So for example, suppose that your grandparents wouldn't have met if there hadn't been the Holocaust. So that means that your existence is dependent on the historical injustice, the Holocaust. But at the same time, you want to say that you are happy to be alive. It's a great thing that you are alive. But how can we consistently hold these two claims? How can we say that the Holocaust shouldn't have taken place, but at the same time, I'm happy to be alive? When there is an arrow from the Holocaust to your existence. So your existence depends on the Holocaust. And this paradox is called the apology paradox because Thompson focuses on politicians' apology concerning historical injustices. So sometimes politicians apologize for horrible events that were caused by their countries. But how could they sincerely apologize for these events if they are happy to be alive and if their existence depends on these events? And you might think that this is a little bit analogous to the existential problem of systemic evil. because in the existential problem of systemic evil, we say that we are happy to be alive, so we affirm existential optimism, but at the same time, our existence depends on natural selection, which seems to be a horrible biological system, which involves a lot of pain and suffering of sentient animals. But I claim that the existential problem is more fundamental and more forceful than the apology paradox. So first of all, the existential problem focuses on the entire biological system rather than specific historical events. And also it focuses on a nomologically necessary link rather than a causally sufficient link. So in the case of the apology paradox, this the slide is gone, but this arrow is only causally necessary or causally sufficient. But in the case of the systemic problem, we are considering a nomologically necessary link between our existence and the biological system. So in that sense, it seems to me to be more fundamental than the apology paradox. Also, the existential problem focuses on the biological system for which humans are not responsible, rather than historical injustices for which they are responsible. So you might think that World War II and the Holocaust and so on, they are results of human free will. So humans are responsible. But in the case of natural selection, we are not really responsible. We are not responsible for the existence of natural selection itself. Also, the existential problem focuses on the existence of the world and humanity as a whole. So we are not talking about specific individuals, specific victims of historical injustices, but we are talking about the humanity as a whole. So in this sense, the existential problem seems to be more fundamental and more forceful, and the scope is much wider than the apology paradox. So here is Thompson's solution to the apology paradox. She says, we can consistently say that we are glad to be alive while regretting or apologizing for the fact that the historical injustice took place, because it is coherent to wish that our existence had been realized through some other causal link. So let me explain this in terms of possible worlds. The apology paradox is based on the following assumption. If the Holocaust had not taken place, then we would not have existed. But this claim doesn't entail the following claim. There is no possible world in which the Holocaust did not take place and we exist. Instead, the first thesis entails the following. In the closest possible world to the actual world in which the Holocaust did not take place, we do not exist. And this is compatible with the following. There is a possible world in which the Holocaust did not take place and we exist. So this is a little bit technical, but the basic idea is that there is a possible scenario in which the Holocaust did not take place, but we exist. And Thompson says that what we express when we apologize or when we regret about historical events is that we wish that that kind of world was actual. So what we do when we wish that the Holocaust had not taken place while holding existential optimism is to express our preference for a world described in full rather than the actual world. However, Thompson's solution does not apply to the existential problem of systemic evil. So my claim is that even if Thompson's solution is successful in undermining the apology paradox, you cannot apply the same reasoning to the existential problem of systemic evil. The existential problem of systemic evil is based on the following assumption. If natural selection had not governed nature, then we would not have existed. And this does not entail the following. There is no possible world in which natural selection does not govern nature, and we exist. Instead, this entails the following. In the closest possible world to the actual world in which natural selection does not govern nature, we do not exist. And this is compatible with the following claim. There is a possible world in which natural selection does not govern nature, and we exist. But the world described in 4 is very different from the actual world because the laws of nature in such a world are different from those that apply to the actual world. So if we say that we wish that natural selection wasn't governing our nature, then we will be imagining a possible situation, a possible world that is radically different from our actual situation or actual world. Because in such a situation, the laws of nature are radically different. And wishing that the laws of nature were different so radically means that existential optimism is false. Because existential optimism says that the world is generally good and we should be happy and grateful to be alive in it. But if we wish that natural selection hadn't taken place or hadn't governed nature, then that means that we are basically we are saying that we are not happy with this world where the laws of nature involve natural selection. So here's a simpler way of presenting this point. So this diagram represents existential optimism, which says that there are some negative things in this world, but overall the world is good. So that's why the yellow part is larger than the black part, which represents negative things. Now, the existential problem of evil seems to suggest that actually our existence depends on something really fundamentally horrible, which is natural selection. So actually the previous diagram, this is not the correct representation of our world. Actually, our existence involves billions of suffering of billions of sentient animals. So actually, overall, the picture is very dark, like this. So that's the existential problem of systemic evil. And the positive things, such as our existence in this world, seems to be dependent on these negative things. So we can be alive because there are billions of other animals that have to suffer for our existence. The problem of evil, or more precisely, the problem of systemic evil, is no longer a problem exclusively for theists. And that's because, again, the existential problem of systemic evil doesn't involve God. It's just it's concerned with the compatibility between the existence of systemic evil and people's affirmation of existential optimism. So it's not an argument against the existence of God. So it applies to atheists as well as theists. And now, what I claim here, what I want to argue here, is that theists are significantly better situated to address the problem than atheists are. So again, many atheists think that the problem of evil is a knockdown objection to theism. But what I'm claiming here is that actually when it comes to the problem of systemic evil, theists are more advantaged than atheists. So atheists commonly think that the material universe is all there is, so the range of their ontology is quite limited. So most atheists are naturalists, so they don't think that there is supernatural reality. So they don't think that there is God, they don't think there is the afterlife and so on. So their ontology is limited to this universe. So for atheists or naturalists, this physical universe, the material universe, is all there is. So that means that their ontology is represented in this picture, which is mostly dark. So there is some positive part, which is in yellow, but largely the whole world is pretty bad. However, theists commonly think that the material universe is not all there is. There are other supernatural things, such as God, which is a transcendental being that exists beyond the material universe, or the afterlife, which is our existence beyond our physical bodies. So the range of ontology is significantly and possibly infinitely wider than that of atheists. So theists believe that the material universe is not all there is, and there is significantly larger part of reality, which seem to be quite positive. So a diagram that theists have seemed to be this. So in this world, there are some positive things. So the small yellow rectangle represents our existence in this material universe, which seems to be pretty good. But at the same time, within the material universe, there are a lot of awful things like pain and suffering of sentient animals, which are represented in the black rectangles. But overall, the whole picture seems to be positive because there are a lot of great things beyond the physical world, which is represented by the large yellow part of this diagram. Theists are significantly better situated than atheists with respect to the existential problem of systemic evil. Theists have significantly greater and possibly infinitely greater resources than atheists. So in order to address the existential problem of systemic evil, atheists have to appeal to something within the physical universe because they think that the physical universe is all there is. But atheists can appeal to many other things beyond the physical universe, such as God, heaven, the afterlife, and so on. And they could also appeal to soul-making, or God's perfection, God's defeat of evil, or God's intimacy with us, and so on. So there are a lot of resources, theological or supernatural resources for theists, which atheists don't have. So here's a conclusion of my overall argument. So first, the problem of systemic evil is stronger than the traditional problem of evil. So it focuses on the whole system of natural selection rather than specific events, specific evil events, or specific types of evil events. And both theists and atheists typically endorse existential optimism. So as I said earlier, atheists are not necessarily pessimistic, nihilistic people. Most of them seem to me to endorse existential optimism as much as theists do. The existential problem of systemic evil, which incorporates existential optimism, can be directed against not only theists, but also atheists. So again, the existential problem of systemic evil is not an argument against the existence of God. It's an argument concerning existential optimism and its compatibility with the existence of natural selection, which involves a lot of pain and suffering. And as far as the existential problem of systemic evil is concerned, atheists are significantly disadvantaged because their resources are limited to the physical universe, while atheists have a lot of other resources. They can appeal to all sorts of things beyond the physical universe. So in this sense, the existential problems of systemic evil is a stronger objection to atheism than theism. So therefore, it is no longer, no exaggeration to say that the existential problem of systemic systemic evil is primarily a problem of evil for atheists. Thank you.
Thank you to Professor Nagasawa for a very interesting speech, talk. I apologize for my voice, but this morning I completely lost my voice. Probably I got a cold, so sorry. I tried to speak clearly. Exactly. Use my hand. I'm Italian, so you can use my hand. Anyway, I really would like to thank Professor Nagasawa for coming and for his interesting talk that I'm sure gave many stimulation, many materials for the next discussion. For me, it was quite hard trying to reply to this paper. Because from one hand, I agree with Nagasawa's thesis. In fact, according to Professor Nagasawa, atheists cannot endorse existential optimism and at the same time affirm that nature is based on the evil process of natural selection. The problem is, how can the world be in general a good place to live if it and our existence in it has its roots in a cruel, violent, and unfair biological system? As I said at the beginning, I agree with Nagasawa's thesis. If atheists endorse the existential optimism, they cannot contend that the biological system is evil. Otherwise, they fall into a sort of inconsistent position. On the other hand, I think there is a loophole, a strategy, a way to respond to the existential problem of systemic evil from an atheist point of view. So therefore, the aim of my paper or my speech is twofold. In the first part, I'll try to show that atheism has the resources to respond to the problem of systemic evil. While in the second part, I'll discuss two theistic solutions to this problem. The first provided by John Hick theodicy, and the second by process theodicies. That are the two approaches, the two theodicies that we have met in the previous meeting. So let's start with part one and with my direct reply to Professor Nagasawa. So a sort of artistic response to the existential problem of systemic evil. According to Nagasawa's argument, there are two basic points, and his argument is sound only if we hold both. First, the existential optimism, according to which the overall actual world is a good place, and we should be grateful for living in it. Second point, the systemic evil that is rooted in the very structure of nature. According to this perspective, the fundamental constitution of the biological system is evil. Now, what I suggest to do is to deny the second point. Atheists are not obliged to maintain this point, and once it is denied, the inconsistency in the existential problem of systemic evil is resolved. So I propose to deny the systemic evil, the second point. So the idea that systemic evil is rooted in the very structure of nature. The core of my argument lies in the distinction between necessity and contingency. As Nagasawa seems to contend, natural selection, with its cruelty and violence, is an evil embedded in the inner structure of the world. This means that the evil of natural selection is a fundamental component of the biologic system, or in other words, that is necessary. There would not have been the actual biologic system without the selective process of nature. So the process is necessary and fixed like a law. All beings in the world are subject to it. There is no way to escape from natural selection. Hence, we can define the natural selection as a sort of necessary systemic process that governs nature. At this point, I would like briefly to touch on the notion of necessity employed in my argument because it's quite important. The term necessary in this argument, in this context, doesn't mean that the principle of natural selection must be true for every possible logical word. It means that given the ontological structure of this word, the principle of natural selection is mutable and permanent. In fact, as far as we rationally and scientifically know, the only way nature has to evolve from simple to more complex form of life is natural selection. Necessary in this context doesn't mean universal or valid in any logically possible word. Necessary means it cannot be otherwise from an ontological standpoint, given the structure and the basic condition of our cosmos. Now, a theist, at this point, can rightly argue that the structure of the world could have been very different. In fact, theism contends the ontologically contingency of this universe. Namely, the fact that since this world, this cosmos, has been the consequence, the fact of a free divine choice, we could have lived in a very different and dissimilar world and environment too. So, for theism, this world and all beings are ontologically contingent. Namely, they could have been different from what they actually are. From a theistic point of view, natural selection is not a necessary feature of the world. In every moment, God could intervene in modifying the inner configuration of the world, of the cosmos, changing its laws. So, the basic organization, the basic configuration, constitution of the world is ontologically contingent. It can be modified at any time. Now, in this discussion, I'm not interested in questioning whether theism can successfully defend its position and what is the reason why God doesn't intervene in the world to, for example, stop some evils, or why God doesn't change the structure of the world. What is important here is to underline the ontological contingency of the basic structure of the world from a theistic point of view. Now, my question is, can atheism do the same thing? According to atheism, it is impossible to modify the inner structure of the world. This is given, is a matter of fact. Therefore, it seems useless and futile to query or complain for the process of natural selection and its cruelty and unfairness, just because there is nobody to blame for or to complain with. The world has not been created by a personal moral agent like God, nor it has been specifically designed as an environment for human beings, but is a brute fact. If the world, so in my opinion, if the world is a matter of fact and is the only existing reality from an ontological point of view, if it doesn't depend on any divine choice, but is the resulting effect of natural processes, it follows that natural selection is fixed necessary process unchangeable. Now, the very concept of evil entails the possibility of good. When we say that an aspect of the world, or the world as a whole, is evil, we mean that it could have been ontologically different